You want to be awake now. Being awake tomorrow doesn't do you any good. That's the big mistake that we make is we're seeking for awakening tomorrow or 5 minutes from now. We're always waiting for it to happen. Like, when is it going to happen? Where is it? Where is it? But then we're practicing putting it off. It's always going to be out there, away from here, away from now, which where it does us no good because we need it here now. And so in order to have that, we have to invite it here now. And we can do that by practicing that.
Welcome, Joy.
Thank
Joy
you.
Lott.
Yeah,
Yes,
very nice to meet you.
very nice to meet you. It's been a while since I saw your name first. I think about 2010, 11, something like that. A
Mm,
long time
probably,
ago.
probably more like 2013. That's when I first started publishing stuff.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so it's great to meet you here today and welcome to the show. The show is called Awakening Now. So it's all about awakening before, during, after, whatever happens. So I would like to know your definition of awakening.
Um, yeah, it's a good question. So, I would, for me, awakening is a process. I know some people they describe awakening as an event, and it certainly might be. But for me, it's a process, and maybe punctuated by many events, but it's definitely a process, and it's a process of knowing oneself.
That's beautiful. And can you tell a little bit about your process? Like, how did that start, or how did you get into this at all? What happened in the beginning?
I don't know about the beginning. I mean, it's been in retrospect, I think I've always been interested in knowing myself, even though I would not have known that I was interested in knowing myself. But I have always been interested in knowing myself, and so I pursued that in lots of different ways. And but I think it really started in a very earnest way, in a what people would call a spiritual path, when I was about 19. And a friend of mine loaned me a cassette tape of Ken Cohen's Qigong meditations. And I had uh, a very distinct experience that was very different for me. Because I knew that I was uh, the person who I associated myself with, the all of that, the story, the body, the mind, the emotions, the sense of pretty much everything vanished. But I still had a sense of being there. And it's such a very thin sense of being there that it was almost as though I could almost have dismissed it,
Hmm.
like I had fallen asleep or something like that. But there was something about it that I knew that I was actually there. And so that made me very curious.
Hmm.
And then after following that, it was kind of a whirlwind of lots of seeking. So let's see, I was involved for a while in an organization called the Church of Religious Science, which is based out of Los Angeles, California. And that's mostly what would be considered to be a new thought organization. So it's sort of, there are a lot of things associated with that kind of movement. It
Hmm.
has a lot to do with a lot to do with manifestation, understanding what all this is and who I am in relationship to that and what power I have in my own experience. And that was interesting, but I didn't find it entirely fulfilling. I was seeking for something more than that. And so then I got involved in transcendental meditation, which I did for a little while, very fanatically. And then and when I did that, I had a lot more of those experiences the kinds of experiences that I had when I did that qigong meditation, where I thought maybe I was falling asleep, but I knew that I wasn't falling asleep. So that was uh, that was a repeatable thing in
Hmm.
practicing transcendental meditation. But I was still looking for something more. And so I eventually came across a person named Papaji.
Hmm.
And I was very, very attracted to Papaji. Actually went to an event that was hosted by one of his students named Yudhishthira. And I didn't understand Yudhishthira or really feel connected to Yudhishthira at all. He's a very lovely man, but I just didn't feel connected to him. But I saw a picture of Papaji. It was the first time I've ever seen a picture of him, and I just felt that he was there looking at me, even though Papaji had passed on. I think in '97, I think was when he died, and this was in probably 2002, something around that. So he had been gone for some time, but I felt that he was there looking directly at me. And it was a very interesting experience because I hadn't had that before. I might have been to events prior to that where there were people who claimed that a picture of a master had the presence of the living presence of the master and that it was possible to relate to them. But I didn't have that experience. But it just happened spontaneously there when I was in that meeting. So that made me very interested or curious about Papaji. And so that was a big turning point because then I had an experience where when I was still in I was still in a waking state, still aware of my body and my mind and everything, but I was able to recognize that even in that state, that who I am is, let's say, independent of that. And so that was a very distinct experience because prior to that, the only experiences that I had had, everything else vanished.
Hmm.
So it was very much like being asleep, except there was more presence. But in this experience, everything was still there. I was still seeing the world. I still was aware of myself as a person, but I was aware that I was not bound by any of that, and that there was a uh, it was more like being a witness of that. So it was all there was a movement happening. All of this activity was going on, but I was the space in which that movement was happening. So that was a very interesting experience. And then what happened after that was pretty much all hell broke loose in my life. That was really tremendous amount of anxiety, depression, just chronic, ongoing, worsening stress. Everything got very, very bad in my life. And that continued for I'd say about 6 years.
Oh, wow.
Maybe even more than that. And so then it was in 2012. I was very at a very low point because I felt that I was going to die, and I had these experiences, but I couldn't integrate them into the rest of my life. It was just very difficult. And then I started practicing. I'll just say I started practicing accepting all of my experience, which is something I had not been doing. I had been resisting my experience. And so I started practicing accepting my experience. And that was, I would say, one of the big missing pieces because prior to that, I had these transcendent experiences, but then I didn't know how, then I would come back to this normal state and and everything became much worse in my normal state. And I hadn't realized that it was possible to integrate all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so in learning to practice accepting my experience, that was the missing piece that started to integrate everything. So that was a huge shift for me. And it was shortly after that. That was in, I think, 2012, and 2013 is when I started sharing. There have been plenty of other things happened after that, but that kind of gives
Mm-hmm.
the highlights up to that point.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing.
Hmm.
Very interesting. It's amazing that it started so early for you.
Yeah,
90.
well, I mean, it's always everybody's got their own agenda,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And it resonates very much for me, that turning point of accepting everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I also noticed that for me it was like learning to say yes to whatever is arising by
Hmm.
practicing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was huge, huge difference in how I could relate to everything. Yeah.
When did that happen for you?
Well, soon after the initial recognition that there was no Ilona running the show, maybe a few months after that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, a friend told me about Pamela Wilson and how she invites everyone to say, "Yay, gorgeous,
Hmm.
welcome." So I thought, wow, interesting. Let's
Hmm.
try that. And it was a huge turning point. Yeah.
Hmm.
Because as you say, there are these expanded awareness experiences. There are events that happen like, wow, I want more of that. But when you come back
Hmm.
to this humanness, everyday routine, everyday life, then it's such a big difference to that wow experience. So this is here,
Yep.
but how to live that, how to integrate that,
Yep.
rather than resisting, we can say yes.
Yep. Yeah. So once it's for me, once I realized that, it was shocking to me that I hadn't realized it previously because seems so obvious, but then it was not obvious before.
Mm. So I see you have a wonderful YouTube channel, and I have been subscribing to it, and YouTube has been showing me videos of you here talking.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I don't always watch them, but I see that you're here, you're just showing up, and I admire that. You're just sitting here doing your own thing. And much respect for that. Wonderful.
Yeah. I wouldn't know what else to do.
Great. And I also love the simplicity of your expression. You found the words to speak in such a simplicity that, everyone can understand it. I think
That's
everyone can
maybe,
understand it.
I did get a comment recently from somebody asking that I speak in simpler terms,
Oh,
which
wow,
is
really?
a good invitation. So I will take them up on the challenge and see what I can do.
Mm, yeah, that was showing up in your books as well and in everything you do.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, my only interest in sharing is to be of service. That's it. So if I'm not able to communicate something in a way that can be helpful to people, then it's pointless. That's 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 the only reason to do it for me. I really don't know what other reason there would be. Maybe other people have other reasons, but that's the only reason for me.
Mm. And what would you say is your main message or messages or stuff that you want to communicate and be heard?
Oh, well, gosh, that's a good question. I mean, I, I, I guess I should know that. Um, I think part of it is that I want people to know that there's nothing wrong with them. that they're honestly exactly perfect, and that so much of the struggle is in fighting with who they are, and that's really not necessary, and that it's possible. There's another way that's possible to learn, and in learning that, then life can become much better. It does not have to be a huge struggle. And so, that possibility of learning that new way is, I think, really key to what I want to communicate, because um, that was a missing piece for a long time in what I was, where I was seeking. I was seeking in a lot of ways where the message that I was receiving, at least, was there is nothing that can be done. It's all sort of pointless and hopeless, and maybe some miracle will happen, and maybe some miracle will not happen. And so I didn't know what to do with that, which was really a difficult situation, because I knew that I was suffering, but what I was hearing, and not necessarily that that was what people were saying, but certainly what I was hearing, was that there was nothing I could do. And so I didn't, there was, that just seemed like a pretty hopeless message to me. But that was what I kept hearing.
Mhm.
Or I would hear there was another message that I sometimes heard, which was that if I do something, there are certain things I can do, but I just have to do them on faith. And then possibly at some point in probably the distant future, I will see the benefits of that. But in the short term, all I have to do is just keep doing the thing on faith. Transcendental meditation was a bit like that. It was
Mhm.
just do the technique, and then do the technique, and then do the technique. And just, for me, that was what I understood. That might not have been what was being communicated, but that was what I heard. Uh, and so that was all I had up to a point. Was I had some techniques that I could do on faith and hope that I could get results in some distant future. And then I had this other message that I heard, which was that there's nothing I can do. And so I just was stuck with suffering and seeking for some other possibility, but not finding it. But when it finally clicked that there is something that I can do, and I can do it right now. And when I do it right now, I experience the benefits of that right now. It's not something that I have to wait for. In letting go, or in allowing this as it is right now, in the not practicing of non-resistance, that benefit is immediately experienced. And so that's, to me, a very hopeful, very wonderful message. Then there's another part of it, which is that there's a complexity there, because while what I just said is true, in the letting go, there's the immediate benefit. There's still usually all the expectations of how that should look, or how
Mhm.
that should feel. If I let go and I experience benefits, then everything should be how I think it should be, which doesn't turn out to be true, at least not for me, and not for most people who I communicate with, at least. It turns out to be that when I let go, then I receive the perfection of what is, and that will help to relieve the unnecessary burden of all of the beliefs that I have about how things should be. But if I keep going back to how I think things should be, and checking in and seeing, is it like that yet? Then I keep myself stuck in this cycle of unnecessary suffering. And so it seems to be two aspects of this. One is the actual letting go, and then the other is, it's still letting go, but it's the flip side of letting go, which is to actually let's say, use the intellect in an intelligent way to uh see the patterns of suffering so that they can be let go. And I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I see it.
Makes very clear sense to me.
Yeah.
Yes, because all these unconscious patterns that are suffering, unless
Hmm.
they are seen clearly and unless they are recognized consciously, they are running your life unconsciously. Like
Yep.
you're a prisoner
That's
of
right.
it. Yeah, so
Yeah.
seeing that consciously gives that moment or gives that opportunity for them to self-resolve.
Yes.
Yeah, and letting go, yeah. And what you described to me sounded like a struggle between hope and hopelessness. And
Yeah.
yeah, hope is taking you away from here, saying that in the
Yeah.
future there will be happiness in the future.
Mm.
And hopelessness says I cannot do anything about this.
Yeah.
So I remember for me it was recognizing the uselessness of hope in this. I mean,
Yeah.
hope has its place, of course, but
Mhm.
in this, it's just there is no room for hope because that
Yeah.
hope is like a thief. It's coming here and taking that this is not, saying that this is not enough. There is something better. So you
Mhm.
can continue seeking for something that is not here, and that's
Yeah.
suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I actually wrote a book once called No Hope Needed.
Oh, wow, lovely. I like that. No hope needed. You wrote a lot of books. How many books have
Yeah.
you wrote?
I don't know. Too
You
many.
don't know. Yeah, I often meet people that they are struggling a lot, and especially with this idea or belief that I am not enough. I want to be happy, but I don't deserve it,
Yeah.
and
Seems
it's
to be.
just so painful for them
Hmm.
to be fighting that.
Yeah.
So, do you have maybe some pointers or some help
Perhaps
in the
how,
situation?
how to deal with that sense
Yeah.
of unworthiness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so to me, it goes hand in hand with self-forgiveness. They're not exactly the same thing, but they're very synergistic. Because a lot of the time, that sense of unworthiness is because uh, I know everything about me. I know all of all the bad stuff that I've ever done or thought. Uh, so I find I think that the practice of forgiveness is very powerful, and because a lack of forgiveness is a way that I tie myself to the past in a negative way. So I'm just repeating that over and over and over. So forgiveness is very powerful. And I find that forgiveness of other is usually easier than forgiveness of self.
Mhm.
And I believe that that's because even though forgiveness of others sometimes is challenging for people, but usually I find that that's easier than forgiveness of self. And I think that's because with other people, we can offer them the benefit of the doubt. We can say, well, maybe they didn't know, or maybe they didn't really mean it, or whatever. And in any case, we're not them, so we don't have to deal with that. We can unburden ourselves by just letting go and saying, I forgive you, I bless you, may you be released to your greatest good. Done. I don't want to be carrying that anymore.
Mhm.
So that can be a huge relief. But then when it comes to myself, I know, like I said, I know all of the stuff, and I know that I did mean it. I know that I really did have bad intentions sometimes. I know that I really did have hatred, and I did have all of these things that I was holding in my heart. And and plus, I'm always there with that. I
Mm.
don't get to just say it's somebody else and I can let it go. It's like I'm still attached to this, so I'm holding on to all of this stuff and thinking that it's me and that I can't that I have to deal with it somehow. So, but nonetheless, I think the same practice applies. It's self-forgiveness. It's the same basic practice. It's just to say, I don't want to suffer anymore. I forgive you. I'm free of the past. I bless you and I release you to your greatest good and done. And sometimes that takes repetition because the habits are there of continuing to bring up that stuff and say, look what a terrible person I am. And I'll never be okay. And, I, whatever, all the stories that we have. And most of those stories are even, they're not even conscious. They're at a subconscious level, but we can feel them. And so it's this, for me, it's the same practice. It's just let go, forgive, release, bless, be done. Just say, I'm done. I'm done with the suffering. There's no good that comes from that. Me beating myself up endlessly does not benefit me. It does not benefit anybody else. It doesn't benefit the world. God is not happier with me for that. Not that there's no good that comes from that. So the only possible intelligent thing to do is to forgive, release, bless, be done. Just it's the only thing that I can do. So that's in my experience, that's the best thing. Maybe there are better things. I don't know, but that's for me, that's the best thing.
Mm. Yeah, that sounds right.
Mhm,
Thank you. Okay, what else comes up is there are people dealing with guilt and shame and feeling bad and
mhm.
not being able to see that, things that happened, they had to happen one way or another. That's what happened.
Yeah,
And that guilt is really eating them from inside. So
yeah,
I guess it's a little bit similar, but what would be
yeah.
maybe your specific way to look at the guilt?
Well, for sure, I think it's important to recognize that guilt is only harmful. I think that we can allow ourselves to hold on to these negative states and negative energies, negative emotions, negative thoughts, because somehow, well, we haven't looked thoroughly enough to see them for what they are. And so we still have some idea that there's some good here, that somehow it's okay and good to hold on to guilt. It's okay to hold on to shame. It's okay to hold on to these things because we think somehow in the back of our mind, there's some upside to it. But I think it's really important and powerful to take a look and see very thoroughly. There's no good at all that comes from this. It does not benefit me. It does not benefit others. It does not benefit the world. Me being guilty is not a good thing. It really doesn't, there's no good at all that comes from that. So when I can see that, then clearly the only intelligent and the right thing to do is to release it. It's like the game of hot potato.
I don't know the
It
game. Can you tell a little
okay.
bit?
It's it's like a child's party game and uh I don't remember how it goes exactly, but it's like you're passing a hot potato and then when the music stops, whoever gets stuck with the hot potato is out or something like that. I don't know exactly how it works.
Really?
But the point is you're holding this thing, this hot potato, the guilt, the coal, the thing that's burning you. And somehow we just keep thinking I need to keep holding on to it.
Mm. Hmm.
But I don't need to hold on to it. I can let it go. So it's like, yes, I keep having this thing that comes up, but it's a habit. I keep holding on to it. So I've been very practiced at holding on to the guilt. So, of course, the guilt keeps coming back so that I can hold on to it some more. But if I practice letting it go, eventually it stops coming back. That's my experience, at least.
Mm. Very interesting and very free. So
Yeah.
what other emotions you would say that are no good for anyone?
Um, well, I should say, uh, just to be totally clear about it, I think that there's everything has a purpose. Everything is not nothing is bad inherently. So there's a functional use of guilt, and I'm sure that for example, let's say that as animals, we're social animals, and so uh, it's important for our survival that we can remain within the social fabric. at least historically speaking. But even today, if you're totally isolated, then you're done for.
Mm.
So we need to be within that social fabric. And so guilt is a primitive mechanism by which we can remain within that social fabric. Somebody says, you shouldn't do that. And enough people say, you shouldn't do that. And I say, oh, I feel really guilty now. And then maybe I won't do that thing again so I can stay within that social fabric. So it serves a function in that sense. But um, but then the way I see it is that we are more evolved than that. We don't actually need that.
Mm.
And I think that I think the way that nature works is for those who are, I know that, saying evolved is kind of loaded term, but I'm using it very loosely. But let's just say that, let's take some other social animal who doesn't appear to have the same capacity for self-reflection, um, like lions. Okay, so lions are social animals. Presumably, and I don't really know that much about lions because I'm not a lion, but presumably lions have the equivalent of guilt, but also presumably they don't carry that around and burden themselves with it. They're probably not beating themselves up psychologically and emotionally all day long because of some guilt that for over something that happened 5 years ago.
Hmm.
Whereas we do. And so I think that when there's a less capacity for self-reflection or self-awareness, then what also happens is that those what I would term lower emotions or lower energies, they serve their purpose, but then they're basically let go automatically by nature. Whereas for us, we tend to hold on to them. But because we have that capacity for higher functions, we also can choose to let go of those things.
Hmm.
And so I think that it's important that we choose to let go of them. And I'm just clarifying that I don't think that these things are bad or wrong, but they're bad or wrong for us to continue to hold on to.
Yeah, holding on to them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I would include in that uh, among those, so shame, anger, depression, fear. Fear is a big one. Fear is for me ongoing. Fear is probably the biggest thing. I don't have anger still comes up sometimes, but it's greatly reduced. I'm blessed to have a family, and that's very helpful for me because my children don't do what I want them to do, and so that provokes that stuff that comes up, the anger, those residues. So it's like, okay, great, I can let that go because I can just see that it's stupid, it's not good, so I can just let that go. But fear, for whatever reason, maybe it's just, well, I guess it's just my makeup. Fear is the main thing that still remains.
Hmm.
Um, and so, but fear, I think, is a huge one for many, many, many people because people are talking about they have anxiety. Anxiety is a big problem, and anxiety is just fear. So, fear, I think, is one, and these don't serve any. They don't serve any good purpose for us, at least not to hold on to. Maybe we could say there's still a momentary benefit of that reaction of fear because maybe it says move away from something, right? Like you get burned, move away. There's that spark of fear, but then don't need to continue to hold on to that and be afraid that something's going to get me. And so all of those kinds of things, anything that we don't like, I think is really something that we don't need to be holding on to and just let that go.
Great. So how would you say you let it go? What what's the mechanism? Let's look at the mechanism of letting go. What happens? How
Yeah,
does that
well,
work?
it's a great question. My experience is that so one, I would say it was a major insight that I experienced, and this would have been, I think this would have been in 2012. um, when I described to you that I really started in earnest this practice of letting go or allowing my experience. And I I was struggling with a tremendous amount of fear, and I realized that I couldn't. If I continued to do that, I was going to end up killing myself. Not necessarily putting a gun to my head, kind of
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
killing myself through that resistance. And and I realized I didn't want to do that. So I had to change what I was doing. And so I started to take a look at what was I actually doing. And I realized that that the holding on to or the resistance to the fear or the anger or any of that stuff was something that I experienced, and I experienced it. Uh, I could most readily access that experience through the physicality of it, or I could say energetically. So because the physical and the energetic are very interchangeable. Okay. So we could say physically or energetically. But I started to notice that that resistance or the holding on or that negative experience was something that I was doing through tension.
Mm-hmm.
And I could notice where I sensed that in my physicality, maybe in my abdomen or in my chest or in my throat or somewhere that or in my forehead, I would squeeze or my jaw and or in my eyes. And I realized that I could let that go the same way that I can make a fist and I can let that go. And so I started practicing that and it works very well.
Mm-hmm. Very
So
interesting.
yeah, I often just coach people through that process of discovering that the experience that they're having is an experience that they're feeling, which seems so obvious, but a lot of the time people don't realize that, just like I didn't realize that. They think it's just some sort of abstract thing that's going on out there somewhere. But it first is to realize I'm what I'm experiencing, I'm feeling. That feeling is something that I can be aware of that's localized here. I can notice that, put my attention on that, and then I can release that the same way that I would release a fist, the same way that, and sometimes that's helpful to actually intensify, to see that I can intensify that feeling. Yeah. And then release it. And with some practice, people get much better at it. And then pretty soon it is always there as in the background, just this awareness of, oh, this thing that I'm struggling with is really just something I'm doing and I can release that. I know how to do that. I can do that right now. And maybe I can't do it completely because the habit might be there. That gripping can be so intense and so ingrained that at first I don't know how to let it go all the way, but I can let it go a little bit.
Hmm.
And if I keep practicing it, I'll get better at it because that's just how things work. Anything I practice, I'm going to get better at. I might not get as good at it as I want to, as fast as I want to, but I will certainly get better at it. And so then in time, my life gets better because I'm not doing those things to hurt myself anymore.
Hmm. So what I hear you saying is that when you feel a tension in the body, which comes up unconsciously, like
Hmm.
something you said or noticed, and you go like, you feel
Yeah.
tight, then
Yeah.
become conscious of that tightness and even tighten it up consciously,
Yeah.
hold
Hmm.
it and just let it go.
Yeah.
Wow, wonderful,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Because I think a lot of it is um, I think a lot of the fear is the fear of, I think a lot of the fear that we have is because we don't know what's going on. So we're experiencing something, but we feel powerless in regard to it. Like, oh no, this anxiety is happening to me.
Mm-hmm.
To realize that the anxiety is something that I'm doing goes a long way in removing that fear of the anxiety. And if I'm not afraid of the anxiety, that's a huge change because then I can start to put into practice how I can release the anxiety instead of being increasing the anxiety because I'm afraid of the anxiety.
Hmm. Hmm. I find it interesting that fear is primarily a fear of a future feeling or future sensation.
True.
Like
I think
this,
it's
this energy
entirely.
comes up here to protect from some future sensation that may happen.
Yeah.
It's just so weird, you know, because it's safe to feel whatever you feel. Like like we are not
Yes.
programmed to know that because of what
Right.
happened in childhood. We learn that it's not
Yes.
safe and it's not safe to express what you feel, mostly.
True. Yeah.
But when
And
you are here feeling whatever energy is here, whatever sensation or feeling is here,
mhm,
you can check and see that it is safe to feel.
true.
Even
Yeah.
the intensity, even the depth of it. So
Yeah.
even that it's too much to feel, that's also something you feel. It's too much,
True.
too muchness.
Yes.
Even that is safe to feel.
That's true. Yeah. That's great insight. Um, there's a guy named Roger Woolger. He's deceased now, but he was a Jungian analyst, and then he became a past life hypnotherapist um, because he found that it was incredibly effective for helping people to release dysfunctional patterns from their lives. And so whether and he his take on it was maybe there are past lives, maybe there are not past lives. It does not matter. What matters is that through this process, uh, you can get the relief. And so maybe there are actually past lives, or maybe this is just some interpretation of the psyche of some inner phenomenon. Doesn't matter. Uh, so he would, but his specific process was that he would regress people to a past life experience. And he found that the most important part was the death experience
Hmm.
because he said if he could bring somebody to a past life, he could bring them through the whole past life. But if they would check out at the last moment at the death experience, then they didn't get the benefits. But if he could just take somebody to the death experience and keep them there present to the whole thing, that would give them the therapeutic benefit and their
Hmm.
whole life would change for the better. Because he found that there are certain patterns that repeat over and over in people's lives, and that those patterns are uh, are distilled into this death experience from the past life. And it makes a lot of sense based on what you were saying, which is why I'm bringing it up. Because uh, if you think about most of us, most people have a fear of death. And we could speculate, okay, maybe that's because of a fear of the unknown or who knows what. But could also say that maybe there's a memory of an event or an intensity that was unbearable or unmeetable.
Oh, wow. Uh-huh.
And his work found that if you can help somebody to meet that experience, then that relieves that fear that's running a person's life. So it just dovetails in with what you were saying. If a person, we have this fear of this future feeling, um, it's why do we can't have a fear of a future feeling, really. What we can have. I mean, I don't disagree with you, but we're clearly projecting into a future something that we are pulling from the past, pulling from a
Right.
memory, which is what you
Right.
said. You said pull it from the childhood, which is likely true. Um, but it could also be the same thing could also be that it's pulled from this past life experience. And whether there's past life or not, it doesn't matter. But this past life experience where there's a death experience that is perceived as being too much. And
Mm-hmm.
so we turn away from it and we say, take me out of here, get me out of here. I can't deal with it. So we just sort of check out. But that's the key moment, is to be present to that. Because if you can be present to that all the way through, then you have the knowledge, the direct knowledge that I can, I can be present to this. I can bear it. I can be here without having to check out, that this is meetable.
Hmm.
And so that relieves the fear. It makes one fearless.
Have you tried that? The past life
No,
regression.
I have not.
Interesting. I never tried that either.
Mhm.
Yeah. Hmm. I ask this a question of everyone that come on the
Mhm.
show. It's what is your best advice for the seeker? Just plain and simple. What is your best advice for the seeker?
Uh, I'm sure that it would change if you asked me 5 minutes from now, uh, or tomorrow. I would have a completely different thing to say. So I don't know
Imagine
one
I'm
thing
the
that I could
seeker.
say.
I'm coming to you and I'm saying I'm waiting to wake up. I want to awaken no matter what. I put my life on pause. I can't do anything. I don't go
Uh,
anywhere.
um,
I keep watching these videos. I keep reading these
oh,
books, going to
yeah,
retreats. I just want to wake up. What do I do?
yeah. Oh, well, okay. That's I can answer that for sure.
Okay.
You practice now,
Hmm.
because if you're you want to be awake now. Being awake tomorrow doesn't do you any good. But that's the big mistake that we make, is we're seeking for awakening tomorrow or 5 minutes from now. We're always waiting for it to happen. Like, when is it going to happen? Where is it? Where is it? But then we're practicing putting it off. It's always going to be out there, away from here, away from now, which where it does us no good, because we need it here now. And so in order to have that, we have to invite it here now. And we can do that by practicing that, which is where it this is where it becomes real. Otherwise, it's always remains a fantasy. So for it to be real, you have to practice it now. And to practice it now, again, probably just repeating what I said earlier, but my best advice is practice letting go now. And then the next thing that comes up, practice letting go, because more things keep coming up. And you just see that you can keep practicing letting go. And in that practicing of letting go, just notice what's revealed, because it's actually always here. You've just been looking for it somewhere else. So you're not going to recognize it until you start noticing it here. And you can start noticing it here if you do this practice of letting go. Then you start to notice, oh, yeah, there's something here. I am that. I am that space of letting go. I am that space in which all this experience is happening. But you can't know that if you're looking for it somewhere else.
That's deep and profound. Thank you. And also sounds very simple,
Mm,
but
yep,
as any skill, it needs to be practiced. Yeah, you can call
absolutely.
it a skill. Letting go is a skill. Just learning to play guitar, it's a skill. Learning
Absolutely.
to cook is a skill. So is letting go is a skill.
Yeah. And no question about it. I mean, 12 years later, I'm still getting better at it.
Wonderful. Me too.
Hmm.
Well, thank you so much, Joy.
Yeah, thank
I
you. It
think
was
I could
very,
talk to you for hours and share so many
yeah, well,
interesting insights you have. One.
maybe
So
some other time.
I encourage people, everyone who's listening, to go on Joy Lott's YouTube channel. And there are so many videos there about all kinds of different topics. And just go through them. Go through them.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, go, maybe just watch the maybe just the most recent one.
Okay, just
It should
mostly.
be, it should just be, that should be enough. You don't need to go through all of them.
Not all of them, but as I heard you say, repetition is also the key.
No, yeah, that's true, no doubt. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was very lovely.
And thank you everyone for watching and listening. And I see you soon. Bye for now. Till next time.